Welcome, dear listeners. I'm excited to present to you this audiobook in which we will embark on an exciting journey through the world of science to learn how our brain works and how it allows us to perceive the world. Chapter 1. How we perceive the world. Our senses continuously send information about the surrounding world to the brain. The brain processes this information and creates our perception of the world. Our perception of the world is not perfect. We perceive the world not as it is in reality, but as we imagine it. This is because our brain constantly makes assumptions about what is happening around us. For example, when we see a moving object, our brain assumes that it continues to move even after we stop seeing it. This explains why we feel that a moving object continues to move even if we close our eyes. Additional examples. The Miller-Lyer illusion. This illusion is that parallel lines framed with arrows pointing inward appear to diverge, while those framed with arrows pointing outward appear to converge. The Ebbinghaus illusion. This illusion is that the middle element in a row of numbers appears smaller than the surrounding elements. The Zollner illusion. This illusion is that we see figures in a pattern of dots that are not actually there. How the brain processes information from the senses. Information from the senses enters the brain in the form of electrical signals. These signals are processed by different areas of the brain, each of which is responsible for processing a certain type of information. For example, visual information is processed in the occipital lobe, auditory information is processed in the temporal lobe, and tactile information is processed in the parietal lobe. How the brain creates our perception of the world. Our brain creates our perception of the world by combining information from different senses. For example, we see an object because our brain combines information from our eyes and from our touch receptors. Chapter 2. How we think using language. Language allows us to process information, communicate with each other, and solve problems. How the brain works with language. Language is processed in different areas of the brain, including the frontal lobe, temporal lobe, and parietal lobe. The frontal lobe is responsible for planning and executing actions as well as for controlling speech. The temporal lobe is responsible for understanding speech and for processing auditory information. The parietal lobe is responsible for understanding spatial information and for processing tactile information. How we acquire knowledge about language. We are born with a certain set of innate knowledge about language, but we acquire most of our knowledge about language through learning. We learn language by listening to the speech of other people and by talking to them. We also learn language by reading and rewriting text. Chapter 3. How we feel. We perceive the world not only through our senses and language, but also through emotions. How the brain creates emotions. Emotions are created in different areas of the brain, including the limbic system, amygdala, and hypothalamus. The limbic system is responsible for processing emotions such as joy, sadness, anger, and fear. The amygdala is responsible for processing acute emotions such as fear and anger. The hypothalamus is responsible for producing hormones that affect our mood and behavior. Asterisk. How emotions affect our perception of the world. Asterisk. Our emotions affect how we perceive the surrounding world. For example, when we are happy, we see the world in a more positive light. When we are sad, we see the world in a more negative light. Chapter 4. How we learn. We learn throughout our lives. We learn from both our mistakes and our successes. How the brain adapts to new conditions. Our brain is constantly adapting to new conditions. It creates new neural connections that allow us to learn and remember new information. This process is called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity allows us to learn new skills, even in old age. How we forget. We forget information that we do not use. Our brain removes information that is not needed for our survival or for solving everyday tasks. The process of forgetting is natural and inevitable. Conclusion. In this audiobook, we have explored the science of how our brain works and how it allows us to perceive the world. We have learned that our perception of the world is not perfect, that we think using language, that we feel emotions, and that we learn throughout our lives. I hope that you have found this audiobook informative and enjoyable.